Shall move to questions without notice. Are there questions without notice? Give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Core inflation, the Reserve Bank's preferred measure, is at 4.4%, the highest level this year. Our core inflation is higher than Sweden, the UK, Norway, Canada, Japan, New Zealand, the Euro area, the US and Switzerland. Since December, core inflation has fallen in these economies, but in Australia it has increased because of Labor's reckless spending and 3 failed budgets. Prime Minister, why do Australians have to live in fear of yet another rate rise under this hopeless government?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I'm asked about inflation. I'm asked about international comparisons. On inflation, the RBA Governor has completely contradicted the Leader of the Opposition's declaration as part of that rhetorical question, where he said that it was Labor's budgets that were having an impact. Well, the truth is that what the RBA Governor has said very clearly is that fiscal policy has been running a surplus for the last couple of years, so I would say that's been helping the inflation situation, if anything. It's a direct quote from the RBA Governor. Indeed, the Shadow Finance Minister, I think, Senator Hume, has said as well the things that cause inflation are not of Labor's making. That's what their Shadow Finance Minister had to say. And of course that's consistent with the reality of what has happened. Now, I'm asked about international comparisons. Australia has faster economic growth than Canada, Germany, Italy, Japan and the UK in the G7. We have a lower unemployment rate than Canada, France, Italy and the UK. We have faster employment growth than Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the US and the UK. We have a higher participation rate than Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the US and the UK. And Australia is the only one with a budget surplus, along with the smallest gross debt.
Order. Members on my left. Before I call the member for Corangamite, I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today are Australians of the Year, Professor Georgina Long AO and Professor Richard Scola AO. On behalf of all members, I extend a very warm welcome to the Parliament and to question time. Give the call to the honourable member for Corangamite.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. What is the Albanese Labor government's approach to lowering energy bills after a decade of failed policies, and how is this different from other approaches?
Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for her question. And of course, Mr Speaker, this is the last sitting day before the Albanese government's $300 in bill release starts next Monday, Mr Speaker. And of course, it's the last sitting day before every Australian receives a tax cut as well. Everybody with an energy bill getting energy relief, and everybody with a tax bill getting a tax cut delivered by the Albanese government. And of course, Mr Speaker, we're also getting on with a job in the longer term of delivering renewable energy, as was outlined yesterday by AEMO in the Integrated Systems Plan, a detailed, modelled, considered plan, Mr Speaker, for Australia's future, with all the implications, all the details there. And of course, that's not all, Mr Speaker. The budget also included measures to help Australians change to lower bills with one click, and also to ensure that they are not rolled over onto more expensive bills automatically without their knowledge. These are important reforms to help Australians with cost of living. Now, the honourable member asked me what other policies we have rejected, and I read that bipartisan respected commentator in The Australian this morning, Peter Credlin, arguing that the Leader of the Opposition has turned the energy debate on its head. Said Dutton turns energy debate on its head. And I've got to say, I don't always agree with Peter Credlin, but I thought you hit the nail on the head this morning, Mr Speaker, because the Leader of the Opposition has turned the energy debate on its head by arguing that the way to reduce bills is to introduce the most expensive form of energy available, nuclear, Mr Speaker. I thought, yes, that's a fair call. There's a debate between commentators. You've got Rod Sims, who argues nuclear energy will push up power bills by $200 a year. You've got Professor Dargaville, who argues it will be $1,000 a year. Well, the Leader of the Opposition could clear it up by releasing his policies and his costings. It's 15 weeks, Mr Speaker, since the Leader of the Opposition said he'd release the details of his policy in a couple of weeks. It's been 15 weeks and all we've got is a map with 7 sites, 6 of which the owners have said they won't want nuclear and 5 of which are in states with a nuclear ban. So this is all going swimmingly. Now, the Leader of the Opposition has also turned the debate on its head by arguing for large nuclear reactors, which just a year ago he said he was dead set opposed to, he wouldn't have a bar of. He's also turned the energy debate on its head by arguing that the way to ensure reliability in the short term is a form of energy that can't be introduced for 20 years. And he's also turned the debate on its head by arguing that small modular reactors issue 1 Cokes can worth of waste a year, when it's actually 12,500 worth of Coke cans a year of waste that the Leader of the Opposition. Now, if the Leader of the Opposition doesn't understand the details of the policies which he's announcing, how could he be trusted to implement them? If the Leader of the Opposition is not across the detail, how could he run this country? It just underlines again, Mr Speaker, that he is the biggest risk to Australia's energy and economic future that this nation faces.
There's far too much noise. The member for O'Connor was consistently interjecting during that answer. He shall cease interjecting immediately, and he is now warned. Member for Hume has the call.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Last week, the Reserve Bank Governor said, I quote, "We need a lot to go our way if we're going to bring inflation down." She also said the narrow path is getting narrower. On the back of Labor's 3rd failed budget, core inflation has jumped up to 4.4% and market interest rates have risen sharply. Prime Minister, why are Australian families paying the price for Labor's economic failures?
Order. The Treasurer will cease interjecting before the Prime Minister begins his answer. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the Shadow Treasurer for his question. Not, of course, to the Treasurer. He seems immune. There's a force field around this Treasurer. A force field. That's how bad his budgets have been. That they can't. We've now been sacked for 4 weeks. 4 weeks after the budget, and of course in Budget Week we had no questions to the Treasurer. That's how good the budget was.
The Prime Minister will pause. The Prime Minister will pause. The member for Bowman is showing complete disrespect with those sorts of remarks. We've had this debate already. He'll leave the chamber under 94A. Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, it is a budget, as the Reserve Bank Governor has acknowledged, quite rightly, that actually brought in a surplus. Now, I know that that is a foreign land to those over there. They've never seen a surplus. They've never visited. Well, they did buy a ticket. They even got the souvenir mugs. The souvenir mugs. But all they produced was merch. What we've produced is lower debt as a result of turning the $78 billion deficit that we inherited into a $22 billion surplus. And what we know is that inflation is lower than it was when we came to office, and we know that inflation peaked in that March quarter at 2.1%, the highest it has been for a very long period of time. So what we have done is to make sure that our measures to provide that cost of living support are designed in a way that they will continue to put that downward pressure on inflation. That's why our energy price relief plan, just like the last one that we introduced, which had an effect of reducing inflation, that's why we've designed it that way. That's why we've designed fee-free TAFE that way as well, to make a difference. And we make no apologies for the fact that more Australians will get a tax cut next week than they wanted. We make no apologies for the fact that everyone in this room here, in this chamber, will get $4,500 less than they were going to get under their plan, and ensured that those people who are doing it tough will get a crack. Will get a crack. Next Monday we'll get benefit, even if they are earning under $45,000 a year, something that those opposite said they'd oppose before they even saw it. Then they said they'd reverse it, and then they called for an election to be held on it. Well, they're so hostile to it, why did they vote for it? Why did they vote for it? But they don't talk about that. We are determined to make a difference. We want an economy that works for people, not the other way around. And that's why all of our cost of living measures are designed in a way to assist the economy and to lower inflation.
Give the call to the honourable member for Aston.
My question is to the Treasurer. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to ease cost of living pressures on Australians, and what approaches have been rejected?
Give the call to the Treasurer.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Because of the member for Aston's efforts and because of this government, every single taxpayer in Aston will get a tax cut on Monday. And the average tax cut in Aston will be $29 a week, and because of the changes we made in the budget, 87% of your constituents will get a bigger tax cut than they would have got before. And this is all about the government's efforts to ensure that Australians earn more and keep more of what they earn, because we see decent wages as part of the solution to cost of living pressures, not part of the problem. And new analysis today, Mr Speaker, shows that average weekly full-time earnings have gone up $119 a week under this Prime Minister, and under this government they now sit at around $98,000 a year. Since the election, full-time earnings have grown an average 4.4%, nearly double what we saw under the wasted decade of those opposite. Now, every single taxpayer gets a tax cut on Monday, but the average full-time worker gets $41 a week from Monday, Mr Speaker. And if the same worker had the same wages growth that we saw under those opposite and the skewed tax cuts that they put forward, that same worker would be $50 worse off each week were it not for our efforts to turn wages around and to give people a decent tax cut to help with the cost of living, Mr Speaker. So under Labor, people are earning more and they'll keep more as well, but that's not where it ends.
Member for Deakin,
on Monday, every taxpayer gets a tax cut. Every household gets energy bill relief, Mr Speaker. Millions of Australian workers on an award will get a pay rise from Monday as well. There will be cheaper medicines from Monday, Mr Speaker, and there will also be 2 more weeks of paid parental leave for new parents. This is how you deliver cost of living relief, not by pushing up prices with more expensive nuclear reactors, which is the approach of those opposite, Mr Speaker. The monthly inflation data that we got yesterday is a timely reminder of why it is so important that we provide this substantial but responsible cost of living relief. It's also why it's so important, as the Prime Minister said a moment ago, that we have turned 2 big Liberal deficits into 2 Labor surpluses. And as the Governor of the Reserve Bank has said, that is helping in the fight against inflation. So, Mr Speaker, you can't ease cost of living pressures with nuclear reactors or the sort of nasty negativity we hear from those opposite. You do it with tax cuts. You do it with energy bill relief. You do it with decent wages. And you do it with cheaper medicines as well, Mr Speaker. And those things are precisely what Australians can expect from Monday next week.
Before I call the honourable member for Wentworth, I'd like to acknowledge some special guests in the gallery. I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today are 8 fellows from the Churchill Trust. I'm also advised that members of the Australian Blind Football Team, the Bilbies, are with us today, and members of the G21 Local Government Alliance from the City of Greater Geelong, Surf Coast Shire, Borough of Queenscliff, Golden Plains Shires and Colac Otway Shire, and the members for Corangamite and the Deputy Prime Minister's electorate. And finally, Year 9 students from Shenton College who are in the gallery with us today from the electorate of Curtin. The member for Wentworth has the call.
My question is for the Minister for Education. One of the biggest cost of living pressures facing families in Wentworth is early childhood education. At my pop-out office last week, several mums told me that childcare costs were affecting their decision to work or even have a second child. Last year's increase in the childcare subsidy were welcome, but families are still struggling, and even those who are relatively well paid. And childcare centres have told me that bureaucracy is adding complexity and cost to their centres. What will the government do to make early childhood education more affordable and less bureaucratic for childcare workers?
Give the call to the Minister for Education.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I, like you, also recognise in the gallery Georgina Long and Richard Scolly, Australians of the Year, as well as Matthew Brown, the Chief Executive Officer of the Melanoma Institute, great Australians and people I'm privileged to call friends. To the member for Wentworth, just like Medicare, universal Medicare is a national asset, just like our universal superannuation system is a national asset. We want to build a universal early education and care system that can be a national asset for this country. You asked about affordability. Come Monday, it will be 1 year since our cheaper childcare laws came into effect, and they have cut the cost of childcare for more than 1 million Australian families. To give you an example, a family on, say, $120,000 a year combined income with one child in care 3 days a week, they have paid over the last year $2,000 less in childcare bills than they otherwise would have had to pay because of the cheaper childcare laws that we've put in place. In addition to that, I can tell you that come Monday, that same family will get a tax cut of about $2,000 as well. And that's real cost of living relief. What I can also tell you is this. Since we came to government, there are more children in childcare, 60,000 more. There are more childcare centres, 700 more. And there are more childcare workers and educators, 30,000 more. But we need more, and we need to do more. That's why the Treasurer announced in the budget a provision for pay increases for childcare workers, and I can advise the member that we will shortly receive the work of Dr Deborah Brennan, Professor Deborah Brennan from the University of New South Wales, and the Productivity Commission to help us to take the next step, to chart a course to develop a truly universal early education and care system.
Give the call to the honourable member for Pearce.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. What additional cost of living support will the Albanese Labor government deliver to help Australians from the 1st of July? What measures have been rejected because they would drive up the cost of living?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Pearce for her question, and I've always said that we're not just here to occupy the space, we're here to make a difference to people's lives. And on Monday we'll be making more of a positive difference to more Australians' lives. A tax cut for every taxpayer, $300 in power bill relief for every household, freezing the cost of PBS medicines, a pay rise for 2.6 million workers on award wages. We want people to earn more and to keep more of what they earn. An extra 2 weeks as well of government-paid parental leave. And it'll make a difference for people like Caitlin, a youth worker employed in the northern suburbs of Adelaide. She has a 2-year-old daughter in childcare. As a result of Labor's tax cuts and the pay rise for award wage workers, Caitlin will be $3,584 a year better off. And that's on top of the help that she received over the past year with cheaper childcare. It will make a difference to people like Helen. Helen's a single mum with a 12-year-old daughter. She's a retail worker employed by Coles. Our changes and the pay rise will mean she is $2,238 better off each year, making a practical, real difference as a direct result of the changes that we have made, both of which were opposed by those opposite. Right. They opposed people earning more and they opposed people keeping more of what they earn through Labor's tax cuts. It will make a difference to every Australian earning less than $45,000 a year, who would have received not a single cent if those opposite had had their way. That's what it means to help people under pressure while not adding to inflation. But of course, those opposite did say no to it all. They said no to getting wages moving, they said no to power bill relief, they said no to cheaper childcare, and they said no to tax cuts for every taxpayer. And in saying no to all of this, they said no to lowering inflation. They voted against power bill relief that knocked 0.75% off inflation. And now they're pushing a plan, the energy source, that will push bills even higher. The highest cost of any new energy source is nuclear, and that is the road that they are going down, even though it costs too much and it takes too long. But it will also, of course, add to uncertainty and lead to less investment in the rollout that we need right now.
The call to the member for Hume.
My question is to the Treasurer. Labor's homegrown inflation has increased for 4 months in a row, in stark contrast to peer countries. Markets and leading economists don't see any rate cuts coming in the next 12 months, and worse, now see a rate rise in August as a real risk. 3 failed budgets have left the Reserve Bank doing all the heavy lifting, and there is no relief in sight for struggling families. When will this Treasurer cut the spin and take responsibility for his failed budgets?
Order. The Minister for the Environment will cease interjecting, and she is now warned for interjecting before a minister has even begun answering a question. The Treasurer has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. That's what happens when you have to put months of questions into one opportunity.
The Treasurer will pause. The member for Deakin, we are 3 seconds into an answer. You 6 seconds. My apologies. 6 seconds into an answer. You'll leave the chamber under 94A. You've been constantly interjecting. Just the minister. No, the Minister for Home Affairs is now warned. Honestly, there is far too much noise. I'm not mucking around today. We are going to hear these answers in silence. The Treasurer has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Homegrown inflation is non-tradable inflation, and it's lower now than when those opposite were in office. That's the first point. Second point is headline inflation was 6.1 when we came to office. It's still higher than we'd like, but it's much lower than what we inherited from those opposite, Mr Speaker. If he wants to talk about international comparisons, I know that he and he's encouraged the Leader of the Opposition to make this mistake too. He wants to use Canada as an example. He did it yesterday. He's done it again today via the Leader of the Opposition. He really should know that the cash rate is higher in Canada than it is in Australia. Inflation is going up in Canada in the most recent data. Unemployment in Canada is 6.1%. Here it's around 4%. And so, Mr Speaker, it's hard to know where to begin with the sorts of things that the Shadow Treasurer puts to the parliament in the hope that we won't know the actual numbers, Mr Speaker. But I think the most substantial part of his question is about the role of the budget in fighting inflation. And as the Governor of the Reserve Bank has said, the 2 surpluses that we've delivered in the 2 years that we've been in office are helping in the fight against inflation. And as the Prime Minister rightly pointed out, you would have absolutely no idea what a surplus looks like because you never delivered one. You printed the mugs. You said there'd be a surplus every year, and the first year and every year thereafter. You posed in those awkward photos with the back in black mugs. You just did everything except for actually deliver a surplus, Mr Speaker. And the Governor of the Reserve Bank has said that our surpluses are helping. Now, of course, the budgets that are handed down by parties of either political persuasion are not the only determinant of prices in our economy, but they can play a helpful role. Turning big Liberal deficits into Labor surpluses is playing a helpful role. Designing our cost of living relief, a big chunk of which comes in on Monday, is playing a helpful role. Energy prices would be higher without it. Childcare prices would be higher without it. Rents would be higher without our efforts, Mr Speaker. But if those opposite want to say that spending in the budget is the primary determinant of inflation, then no wonder they left us with inflation much higher than it is now, Mr Speaker. They delivered a budget with no savings in it, their last budget. They spent $40 billion, almost double what we spent. They had 2 deficits worth $135 billion that we've turned into surpluses. They spent most of the upward revision to revenue, Mr Speaker, and they found no savings in their last budget. So if it's
Treasurer will pause. The member for Hume is the members on my right. I want to hear from the member for Hume on his point of order.
Relevance, Mr Speaker. The question was about the Treasurer's failed budgets and why market interest rates have got.
Order. I want to hear from the Leader of the House.
To the point of order, Mr Speaker, this question asked about allowed full range on everything about budgets and everything about the economy. In terms of an attempt at a tightly framed question, I don't think I've seen anything worse with that aim than this one. It went across the field in the portfolio.
Just going to ask it was a broad question with a number of things within it. I know the question at the end was a political question at the end, but the Treasurer's just got to make sure his answer is directly relevant to what he was asked by the member for Hume.
Mr Speaker, this is why the Leader of the Opposition was moved to insist the other day that the Shadow Treasurer is not incompetent. That the Shadow Treasurer is not incompetent, which is what his colleagues think of him, Mr Speaker. Now, Mr Speaker, the reason inflation was higher under them than it is under us is we've been more responsible with the budget than they ever were, and the best evidence of that is the two surpluses that we turned.
Give the call to the honourable member for McNamara.
Thank you very much, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Environment and Water. How has the Albanese Labor government made progress on renewable energy project applications after a decade of neglect, and what approaches have the government rejected?
The call to the Minister for the Environment and Water.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I want to thank the member for McNamara for his question. He's a wonderful local member and a huge supporter of renewable energy. Mr Speaker, the transition to renewables is real and it's happening, but it's no thanks to those opposite. It's no thanks to the Liberals, it's no thanks to the Nationals, and frankly it's no thanks to the Green political party either. Those opposite had 22 energy policies when they were in government, and they didn't land a single one. They were warned that 24 coal-fired power stations were closing, and they did nothing to replace the energy generation capacity that was leaving the grid. And frankly, the delays and the dysfunction scared renewables investment offshore. But I understand why the Greens political party are a bit sensitive about this as well. They may well regret teaming up with the Liberals to knock off the carbon pollution reduction scheme. Because of that, we saw an extra 80 million tonnes of carbon dioxide pollution enter the atmosphere. They may well regret putting the renewables transition years off track because of the fact they teamed up with the Liberals. Frankly, Mr Speaker, it's up to us now to work overtime to get the renewable energy transition back on track, and thankfully the Minister for Energy and Climate has been doing that. He's told us that we're up to 25% renewable energy in our grid, cheaper, cleaner renewable energy. And as Environment Minister, I'm ticking off a new renewable energy project about every fortnight. And that contrasts to 7 to 1 compared with coal and gas projects. 7 renewable energy projects to every coal or gas project that's being approved. What is the risk to the renewable energy boom under Labor? Well, the risk is sitting here and the risk is sitting right up there. We know that the nuclear fantasy proposed by those opposite is too slow and it's too expensive. We know it's too expensive. The estimate for the cost of it is $600 billion. But of course it's not the Liberals or the Nationals telling us the cost of their own policies. No, we're relying on experts for that. They say that they know the cost, but they're not prepared to share it with the Australian public. I hear the Leader of the Nationals interjecting about koalas. It was the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party who saw koalas added to the threatened species list, and it's the Green Senator that's bulldozing koala habitat.
Order. The Leader of the Nationals and the Deputy Leader of the Opposition are just going to cease interjecting to assist the House, so I can hear from the member for Dawson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. A support service for people who are homeless in my electorate of Dawson is at breaking point. Operator of Orange Sky Laundry, Lisa Jemison, has said, quote, "You go to the grocery store and the price difference from 6 months ago is astronomical. We've seen rental increases from $260 per week to $350. Prime Minister, why are Australian families paying the price for Labor's economic incompetence?"
The call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for...
Order. Members on my right will cease interjecting. Member for Lyons.
You wanted them to pay more.
Order. Order. No. Members on my right will cease interjecting, and the member for Dawson has asked his question. He was heard in silence. So we're just going to continue with the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for Dawson for his question that go to cost of living measures and the impact that it has on people in his community. Well, what we know is that every single one of people who are working in that community and paying tax will get a bigger tax cut on Monday as a result of the measures that we've put in place. And the member for Dawson also knows that those opposite on his team called that it would crush confidence, it would obliterate opportunity, it would undermine the strength of the economy, and it was Marxist economics to give everyone a tax cut. We are getting wages moving again, but you voted against every single measure that we've put in place to ensure that wages got moving. The coalition claimed that it would return Australia to the dark ages, it would close down the economy and it would leave supermarket shelves bare. On cheaper medicines, you voted 6 times in the Senate to stop it, to stop cheaper medicines. Not surprising, given as Health Minister, the opposition leader of course wanted to jack up the price of essential medicines by $5 a script. When we strengthened Medicare by tripling bulk billing incentives, the Shadow Health Minister dismissed the initiative and opposed it. On cheaper childcare, there was opposition to that as well. And our energy price relief plan was described by the former leader of his party, the National Party, not once, but the sequel no one wanted to see, the member for New England, who rose to the position twice. He described it as Venezuelan communism. That's how he described cheaper energy bills. Now, when it comes to housing, there's been a vote over there in the Senate this morning where once again we've seen the coalition of the Coalition and the Greens get together once again.
I know where the Manager of Opposition is going with this. I'm glad the Prime Minister clarified what his definition of that was. So it's been used in a different term, but I'll hear from the Manager. Yeah. We'll just get the Prime Minister to return back to the question.
Mr. Speaker, I was asked about housing, and over there in the Senate today, they have voted to split off the buy-to-rent, build-to-rent proposals from our tax legislation that would encourage more investment in development. And here we have the reason why the Greens say they oppose it is because developers will build the new housing. And they voted for that proposition.
Order. The Prime Minister's time
Who do you think builds houses?
Concluded. Order. When the House comes to order, I'll hear from the member for Bennelong. Before the Prime Minister is seeking the call.
I seek to take the unusual step of tabling the Australian Greens release, praising their alliance with the Liberal Party and the National Party, once again opposing housing.
The member for Bennelong. Order. Members on my right will cease interjecting. I wish to hear from the member for Bennelong.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Industry and Science. What do scientific experts, including at the CSIRO, tell us about the best way to deliver reliable, affordable, clean energy? Which approaches are found to be the most expensive?
Give the call to the Minister for Industry and Science.
Thanks, Speaker, and thanks to the member for Bennelong for the question. And he represents an area with a terrific store of scientific and research talent. Speaker, on this side of the House, we respect science. Science that's long alerted us to the impact of climate change and also what we can do about it. And the evidence is clear. Renewables will lower emissions the fastest and at the lowest cost. We know that because the National Science Agency, the CSIRO, does the work to help establish the facts, to outline the evidence. The government respects its work. The best way to demonstrate that respect is to listen to what they say. We can cut emissions and grow jobs. That's what our Future Made in Australia plan is all about, mobilising Australian manufacturers to make the things that can reduce emissions and create secure jobs. And we are getting on with that job. On our watch, there's been about a 25% increase in renewables into the grid, over 50 renewable projects approved, enough to power 3 million homes, creating jobs for welders, for engineers, electricians, steel workers, riggers, not just workers in our cities, but in regional areas where blue-collar workers can see a pipeline of work that can sustain them in their communities. Renewable energy projects that deliver cheaper energy and more jobs now, not decades down the track, and that's how you deliver cost of living relief, not by pushing up power prices with the most expensive form of power going, nuclear. Now, the CSIRO GenCost report couldn't be clearer about the cost of the Coalition's one-page nuclear power plan. Nuclear power at least 8 times as expensive to deliver than solar and wind, and the earliest that nuclear power could be ready, 2040. Now, we can get this job done today without expending the extraordinary amounts of taxpayer dollars on their one-page nuclear plan. And, Speaker, it's policy on a post-it note, Speaker. That's what the Liberals and Nationals are pushing. On that side, voodoo economics, ignoring the evidence, but not just that, actively undermining it. We had Senator Canavan, who accuses the CSIRO, in his words, of living in a fantasy land of spreadsheets. I don't know what Excel's ever done to him, but he's got a big beef with it. The Coalition delivers policy on a post-it note and then chips scientists who use spreadsheets with evidence and fact as living in a fantasy land. We also had the member for Mitchell, who said science is absolutely clear, nuclear power will be an integral part of humanity's future. That's not just my view, it's a view of many important people and scientists.
The minister's time has concluded. The member for Mitchell will cease objecting, so I can hear from the member for Mallee.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. In 3 failed budgets, Labor has made the fight against inflation worse with bad decisions and the wrong priorities. BetterShares chief economist David Bassanese described the latest inflation data as a shocker, saying it places huge pressure on the Reserve Bank to raise interest rates in August. Prime Minister, why are Australian families paying the price for Labor's economic incompetence?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for her question, which is similar to previous questions in today's question time. What we are doing on the economy and in budgets that I'm asked about is turning Liberal Party deficits into Labor surpluses. That's what we've done. Not once, but twice. And we're doing that whilst we're providing support for people who most need it. Now, those opposite have an opportunity to come in here and to move a private member's bill to restore their tax cuts that they wanted, where they would get, and I'd get as well, $9,000 rather than $4,500. But they'd have to explain to the good people of Mallee and that region, many of whom earn certainly under the top marginal tax rate. Sorry, but if you're under $45,000, you miss out, because people at the top end need that $9,000 rather than people on under
Order. The member
$45,000.
for Petrie and the member for Mallee will cease objecting.
If that's the view that they have, then they should. They should take up the opportunity that they have, perhaps in alliance with their friends in the Greens again in the Senate, to put forward such legislation. But they don't do that. We know that they consistently oppose any increase in wage rises, including for people on the minimum wage, which many people in regional communities represented by the National Party are on. Now, we on this side of the chamber, we want people to earn more and we want people to keep more of what they earn. But we also want to make sure, as I've said consistently, that we don't want people to be left behind. We don't want people to be left behind, which is why we are looking after the people according to need. But that's why as well we're looking after families with cheaper childcare. That's why our energy price relief plan of $300 that come in on Monday. Yeah, I have been to the members' electorate. Actually, I get out and about. I've been to yours too.
Order.
Yeah.
Order.
Have you dropped in? That's the question. That's the question. Have you dropped in? So we're busy trying to make a difference. With practical plans. Every single one of the plans providing cost of living assistance has been opposed by those opposite.
Give the call to the honourable member for Macon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme. What reforms are the Albanese Labor government implementing to ensure the long-term sustainability of the National Disability Insurance Scheme? What will be the cost to the taxpayer and the NDIS participants of delays to these reforms?
Give the call to the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme and the Minister for Services Australia.
Thank you for your question. Every member of the House knows that the NDIS is changing hundreds of thousands of lives for the better. But we also know the scheme is growing too fast. In the process of reforms, we've discovered a serious loophole which we seek to address in Parliament right now. Specifically, where an annual budget is spent in 3 to 6 months, there is nothing to stop the automatic top-up after the amount has been expended before the expiry of the plan. Now, sometimes there's good reason why the plans get spent more quickly, but I'm advised by the agency that 2/3 of the requests for automatic top-ups are not legitimate. So there's a bill in the Senate to close this loophole. We're proposing a total capped flexible budget for all participants. This will provide accountability for taxpayers and better choice and control for participants. This bill has been the subject of a 12-week Senate inquiry. 205 written submissions, 50 witnesses, 3 days of public hearings. The coalition members on the Senate committee did not dissent from the findings. However, the coalition, in alliance with the Greens, is now seeking to delay this bill another 8 weeks to have a second Senate inquiry. Now, sometimes in Parliament, time is not of the essence.
Order.
But I seek to table at the end of my answer a note summarising what the actuary of the NDIA has said. A 2-month delay in the passage of this bill means a $1.06 billion increase to expenditure over the forward estimates. Now, as a consequence, the Liberals and the Greens want to delay the legislation, which will cost $1 billion. And the delay is pointless.
Order.
The Greens are not a party of government, and the Liberals opposite know we could do anything in this bill and they will never vote for it. But what makes this delay even more pointless and wasteful in a cost of living crisis is deep down the Libs and that know they're probably going to vote for the bill in August. So why are we having a $1 billion ego vanity show? That $1 billion that you're willing to waste money on, that could pay for the packages of 60,000 children on the scheme in a year. The average taxpayer in Australia pays $20,000 net tax. The coalition and their Green allies are willing to say to 54,000 taxpayers that your tax you pay in a year doesn't matter. It's the population of Gladstone or Ballina or Port Macquarie. This is such a dumb thing to do. I ask more in hope than experience. Don't hide behind this notion that you want to consult. Just get on and save the money for the scheme.
Concluded. The call to the honourable member for Griffith.
Thanks, Speaker. Question to the Treasurer. Skyrocketing rents, increasing at close to twice the rate of inflation, and corporate price gouging are driving inflation and threatening homeowners and renters with another interest rate rise. Treasurer, instead of allowing the Reserve Bank to hit people with another interest rate hike, why don't you show leadership and work with National Cabinet to impose a rent freeze and cap and make price gouging illegal?
Order. The member for Moreton is warned. The Treasurer has the call.
Mr Speaker, the member for Griffith has got a lot of nerve asking this question today, having just teamed up in the Senate with the Coalition, with the Conservatives, to knock off tens of thousands of rental properties to help fix the problem that we have with housing supply in this country. Now, if the Greens political party really cared about building more homes, then they would have voted for the tax break that would have built tens of thousands of homes for people to rent. Now, this is the hypocrisy at the very, very core of the Greens political party, and they keep teaming up with the Conservatives in the Senate and in the House of Representatives to prevent this country building more houses that our people desperately need. And the consequence of your vote in the Senate today, the consequence of your vote could be 160,000 fewer homes for homeless people and young people to rent. Now, if you really gave a stuff about homelessness in this country, you would vote for the policies that would build more housing supply in this country. And you wouldn't conduct this ridiculous, underhanded, hypocritical campaign which sees you vote more frequently with them than with us to build the homes that you pretend you want to see in our local communities. Now, Mr Speaker, if the member for Griffith and his Green colleagues really cared about homelessness, if they really cared about rental pressures, they would vote with the Labor government to build more properties in this country for people to rent. And every time they don't do that, they lay bare what's really going on here. They are much, much more interested in fighting Labor in the inner cities than they are for fighting for more homes for young people and the homeless.
Order. 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 The Treasurer and the member for Griffith will cease interjecting. The member for Spence is warned. Order. 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 No. Order.
Not as bad as the Nats and the Liberals when they get going, though. So that's in the Nats Liberal agreement.
Okay. We'll now hear from the member for Holt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. What action is the Albanese Labor government taking to tackle the public health menace of vaping? Why is urgent action required? What approaches have been rejected?
Call to the Minister for Health and Aged Care.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Holt for her question and for her support of these reforms because, Mr Speaker, vaping is a scourge. It is a public health menace, particularly for children and for young people. A product that was presented as a therapeutic good that would help hardened smokers kick the habit finally has actually been deployed by Big Tobacco as a tool to recruit a new generation to nicotine addiction. You just have to look at the products, Mr Speaker. Products like this, brightly coloured with cartoon characters on them and ridiculous flavours like bubblegum ice, Mr Speaker, often designed as highlighter pens or USB sticks so that they can be hidden in pencil cases away from the eyes of teachers and parents. And you just have to look also, Mr Speaker, at where they're being sold. 9 out of 10 vape stores are located within walking distance of schools, and that is deliberate because that is exactly their target market. And the tragedy, Mr Speaker, is big tobacco is winning this war. 1 in 6 high school students are vaping. 1 in 4 very young adults are vaping, and it is causing them real harm, Mr Speaker. Parents are having to manage kids with serious nicotine addiction. Teachers are being rostered not just to stand outside of toilets, but inside school toilets during lunch breaks and recess to police vaping in their schools. And, Mr Speaker, they are all of them asking us in this building, how on earth did this happen? How on earth did this happen? Now, to his credit, Greg Hunt tried to stop the flood of imported vapes into this country, but he was rolled by his party rim within a matter of days, and they kept on flooding in, Mr Speaker, until January 1st, when our government finally banned the import of disposable vapes. And in those 6 months, we have seized more than 2.8 million vapes, taking them out of the hands of our kids finally, Mr Speaker. And today, Parliament passed the next phase of our reforms to ban the sale and the supply of vapes outside of therapeutic settings. Remember, this was supposed to be a therapeutic good. So from Monday, you'll only be able to buy a vape from a therapeutic place for therapeutic reasons, from a pharmacy, after a conversation with a qualified health professional. Not in the vape stores, not in convenience stores, not in other retail settings, Mr Speaker. And this is a real change, Mr Speaker. The College of General Practitioners said this is about saving children's lungs and younger generations from getting hooked on nicotine, Mr Speaker. Now, every now and then, Mr Speaker, this place has a real opportunity to do something meaningful and lasting for the health of young Australians. And today was one of those days, Mr Speaker, and we did it.
The call to the honourable member for Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The annual St Vincent de Paul Society Tariff Tracker has exposed the impact of eye-watering energy prices, with households in some regional areas now paying a record $4,170 a year for combined gas and electricity bills, despite the Prime Minister promising on 97 occasions that he would reduce power bills by $275. Prime Minister, why are Australian families paying the price for Labor's economic incompetence?
Order. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I'm asked about energy policy and I'm happy to speak about it. Because on Monday, every household will get $300 off their energy bills and every small business will get $325 off their energy bills. And that's something that those opposed, they're against it. So they come to the dispatch box.
Order. The Leader of the Nationals has had a really good go this question time. So he's warned and will not say another word for the remainder of question time. The Prime Minister has the call.
They come to the dispatch box and ask questions about energy prices at the same time as they vote against energy relief in people's bills that will make a practical difference, and at the same time as they now propose the highest cost new form of energy possible in nuclear. And the true cost of nuclear power in Australia is the grave risk and the great cost of going backwards, not just the hundreds of billions of dollars in the cost of constructing the reactors, more than a decade away, not just the price that households and businesses would pay for energy that is 8 times more than renewables, but the danger that another decade of denial prevents the action on climate, but also the investment in energy that we need right now. I have no
Order. Members on my left. The member for O'Connor.
comprehension, because the opposition haven't released any detail at all of how they could possibly think that the most expensive form of new energy will somehow do anything
Prime Minister will
other than to drive energy costs up.
The member for Lindsay on a point of order.
Obviously, on relevance, we didn't ask about the opposition's policies.
The question was about families paying more. It was a broad-ranging political question, but Prime Minister will return back to the question.
Right, Mr Speaker. I'm speaking very directly about energy and costs and what the risks are. Of those opposite. Because they want to have nuclear power to be deployed as just the latest part of culture wars. But what they want to do is to drive investment away. Now, what we are doing is adding to supply. Indeed, our plan has added 32 gigs. We'll add 32 gigs to the system by 2030. Rooftop solar today is already generating twice as much energy today as their reactors would have by 2050. Twice as much right now, today. And we've seen a 25% increase in renewables in the national grid. And one of the reasons why people are doing that in the electorate of Lindsay is to lower their energy bills. And just as it makes sense for households, it makes sense for our national economy as well.
The call to the honourable member for McEwen.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister for Social Services. What cost of living relief is the Albanese Labor government delivering to Australian households, including low-income households?
Give the call to the Minister for Social Services.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for McEwen for his question and what a fantastic local member he is. And of course, like the member for McEwen, Labor understands that people are under pressure, and that is why our #1 priority is delivering responsible cost of living relief. And just in a few days' time, significant help rolls out. Now, from the 1st of July, all 13.6 million Australian taxpayers will get a tax cut. And of course, that includes many low-income earners who those opposites sought to deny those tax cuts in their plan. And of course, from the 1st of July, 2.6 million low-paid workers will get their third consecutive pay increase backed by this government, because Labor wants people to earn more and keep more of what they earn. Now, on the 1st of July, 1.3 million low and middle income Australian families receive a boost to their family tax benefit. Now, this boost was regularly denied by those opposite when they were in government. And next week also marks the start of our historic expansion to paid parental leave, with an extra 2 weeks added to the government scheme from the 1st of July this year. These families are not double dippers, like the Coalition would have you believe. They deserve extra support, and we are delivering it. Our government is also providing more support to pensioners. From July 1, we're extending the freeze on the Social Security deeming rate and increasing the income and assets limit, meaning more than 1 million pensioners will be able to keep more of their payment. And we're of course also freezing the cost of PBS medicines for every Australian, and we are delivering $300 in energy bill relief for every household next week. Now, of course, this is not the end of this relief. The government is delivering. What did you say about misogyny the other day? What did you say about misogyny the other day? Of course, this is not the end of the relief our government is giving. Our government, of course, is delivering. If you will pass the bill...
The Minister will direct her remarks through the chair.
Thank you, Speaker. We are delivering, of course, our Commonwealth rent assistance on extra boost on the 20th of September, if you actually will pass the bill. Now, of course, Of course, Mr Speaker, this is how you deliver cost of living relief, not by pushing up power prices with a nuclear dream. And this has been credibly established that nuclear energy is the highest, most expensive form of power. Now, we on this side of the House will deliver real cost of living relief while they thrust nuclear power onto everyone.
Concluded. The Leader of the Opposition on a point of order.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The point I was making was that the minister should table the document from which she read verbatim.
Okay, we're just going to keep order. Well, the Leader of the Opposition knows if he wishes the minister to table a document, he can do so. He did not take the form of the House to do that. He simply asked the minister to stop reading or whatever she was.
You read your own 30
There's no point of order, and I just, you know. That's the correct way to do that. When you rose on your feet, you didn't ask me to do that. You didn't ask, could the minister table? Are you requesting the minister to table document? Was the minister reading from confidential documents? And I remind all members, during questions, order, the Minister for Social Services and the Assistant Treasurer will cease interjecting. Remind all members, reading questions and reading answers is not against the standing orders. Order. We're going to move to the member for Mackellar.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is for the Attorney-General, and I'll be reading it. Integrity in our political system is hugely important to the people of Mackellar, and whistleblowers are a vital pillar of that integrity. Yet right now we have a whistleblower serving a lengthy jail term and one facing trial. Civil society is united in its call for a federal whistleblower protection authority, something the Attorney-General promised before the 2019 election. Will you recommit to establishing a whistleblower protection authority in this term of government? Thank you.
Give the call to the Attorney-General.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I do thank the member for Mackellar for her question. I can assure the member for Mackellar that integrity is very important to every member of our government, and I would hope that integrity is important to every member of the Australian community. Our government is committed to delivering strong, effective and accessible protections for whistleblowers. And just to remind the House of where we've got to on this, in June last year, the Parliament passed priority amendments to the Public Interest Disclosure Act, which ensured that there were immediate improvements to the public sector whistleblower scheme in place in time for the commencement of the National Anti-Corruption Commission. That set of reforms implemented 21 of the 33 recommendations of the review of the Public Interest Disclosure Act 2013 that was conducted by Mr Philip Moss, an eminent former Australian public servant, in 2016. And again, to give some context to that, these were the first significant public sector whistleblower reforms since the Public Interest Disclosure Act was first enacted by the Gillard government, a Labor government, in 2013. When we enacted the Public Interest Disclosure Act in 2013, we took the precaution of writing into that Act a statutory review. That statutory review took place because the former government didn't have a choice, and the statutory review was carried out by Mr Moss. Regrettably, the former government didn't see fit to implement a single one of those recommendations. We have implemented 21 of the recommendations.
The member for Mackellar on a point of order.
A point of order is relevance. My question was directly about the Federal Whistleblower Protection Authority. Thank you.
The Attorney-General needs to remind himself of the standing orders just regarding the direct relevance provisions. I'm just going to make sure his answer is compliant with that.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The government is now progressing a second, broader stage of reforms which has included the release of a consultation paper. There has been public consultation on additional supports for public sector whistleblowers, which may include a whistleblower protection authority. There have been submissions received as part of that consultation process, and they are being used to inform the government's next steps for reform.
Order. Give the call to the honourable member for Chisholm.
Thank you so much, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering more affordable housing, and what are the risks?
Give the call to the Minister for Housing, Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Small Business.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank our terrific member for Chisholm for that question, because she knows, of course, that Australia doesn't have enough homes and we haven't had enough homes for a long time. Indeed, the Albanese Labor government understands that too many Australians are facing serious housing challenges, which is why, of course, we have our $32 billion Homes for Australia plan. And part of that plan, of course, as I've said here many times, is the Housing Australia Future Fund. Now, we all remember the Housing Australia Future Fund and what happened in this parliament. Of course, it got delayed by the Liberals and the Greens teaming up together. And indeed, it has done its first tender round, as I said earlier in the week, and those tenders will be being announced later on in this year. And of course, they have been delayed by at least 6 months because of the unholy alliance between the Liberals and the Greens in the Senate again. And of course, another part of our Homes for Australia plan is the Help to Buy. Help to Buy will be in the Senate again next week, and again we've got the unholy alliance of the Liberals, who are supposed to be the party of home ownership, which clearly aren't, and of course the Liberal Party, who are the Greens over here, who are supposed to support shared equity schemes. Indeed, shared equity schemes were part of the Greens' pre-election policy. This shared equity scheme, the Liberals and the Greens are teaming up again to block in the Senate. And then, of course, another important part of our Homes for Australia policy is our build-to-rent changes. Now, these are changes that the Property Council of Australia has said will build around 160,000 rentals, including 10% of them being affordable rentals, Mr Speaker, for people that need homes, as part of our Homes for Australia plan. But what have we seen today? Again, we've seen the unholy alliance of the Liberal Party and the Greens political party teaming up again in the Senate to block affordable homes. So, Mr Speaker, they're against more social and affordable homes, they're against more affordable rental homes, and they're indeed against shared equity schemes to get people into home ownership, both the Liberals and the Greens, Mr Speaker. Today they voted for higher rents and more homelessness. That's what the Liberal Party and the Greens have done today in the Senate. Voted for higher rents and more homelessness. I hope they're proud of themselves for continually teaming up with the Liberal Party in the Senate to block homes of every sort. We're not just talking about private homes here, we're talking about social and affordable homes being delayed. We're talking about home ownership being delayed for people that otherwise wouldn't be able to. And we're talking about affordable rentals. Mr Speaker, they should be ashamed of themselves in the Green political party. They say they care about housing and homelessness, yet they keep teaming up with the obstructionist Liberals in the Senate, playing games with people's lives. This is about homes for people that need them.
Has concluded. Give the call to the member for Barker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Mount Gambier-based food manufacturers, Sugar and Spice, in my electorate of Barker, is at breaking point.
No, order.
Since 2020...
Order. Members on my right, I'm not sure what is being so exercised here, but... Well, as I said, people can read things in the chamber. That's order. We're going to reset the clock so the member can read his question, and no, which is entitled to do. And we're not going to have any interjections about it. So the member for Barker has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, Mount Gambier food-based manufacturer Sugar and Spice in my seat of Barker is at breaking point. Since 2020, they have seen their energy costs rise by 36%. That's despite seeing usage decline. Owners Victor and Tanya have told me, and I quote, "This significant rise in energy costs since Labor has come to office is very disappointing. Prime Minister, when will Australian families pay the price for Labor's economic incompetence?"
Yeah. The problem. Order. No. We're not. We're just going to handle this. The member for Barker didn't get his question in time. That means if a minister now goes over time, I don't want anyone interjecting that it's time. So I'm trying to be flexible with questions to make sure questions are asked. So enough of the yelling at me. Time. Okay? It's a two-way street. The Prime Minister has the call.
I thank the member for Barker for his question and for being here after 3 o'clock. Well done, son. Well done. Well done. And it's Thursday, so a special stamp for the member for Barker. An electorate I've also been to and invited the member for Barker when I went to his electorate, and he attended as well. And we worked with, we talked to many people in that electorate who were doing it tough.
The member for Barker has asked his question. You voted against energy bill relief. Prime Minister is going to be heard in silence.
Who were doing it tough there in the Riverland during what was just one of the many natural disasters that I've had to attend as Prime Minister in the just over 2 years that I have had the great honour of being Prime Minister. And that is why we are seeking not just the cheapest form of new energy because of the economics that will drive down energy costs, but we're also doing it because of the cost of inaction to our natural environment. There is an enormous cost of inaction, and that was exacerbated, of course, by the 10 years in which they were in office, where they had 22 energy plans but didn't nail a single one. We have one energy plan, and we are implementing it. With a 43% reduction in emissions by 2030 and net zero by 2050. And what that is doing is driving the opportunities that are there for business to invest, because greater supply of renewable energy at the lowest cost form of new energy will lead to, of course, over a period of time, to the lowering of our costs. Now, we know, therefore, the Environment Minister earlier on today spoke about the 50 renewable energy projects that have been ticked off, enough to power more than 3 million homes. We have seen a 25% increase in renewables in the national grid, and we've seen over 330,000 rooftop solar installations last year alone, and we're already halfway to meeting our 2030 emissions target. This is the progress that we have made over the last 2 years. We know that there has been an impact on global energy as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine that occurred right around the world. But what we are dealing with is a plan that deals with the immediate cost of living pressures through our energy price relief plan, whilst we're putting in place an energy system that will lead to the cheapest form of energy being provided to households and to small businesses.
The call to the honourable member for Adelaide.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Veterans Affairs. How will the Albanese Labor government's Home for Australia plan respond to the housing challenges confronting Australians' veterans, and why is action urgently needed?
Give the call to the Minister for Veterans Affairs and the Minister for Defence Personnel.
Thank you, Speaker. And I want to thank the member for Adelaide for this important question and acknowledge his support for the over 3,800 veterans in his community. veterans are more than 3 times more likely to experience homelessness than the general population. And on census night in 2021, we saw that over 1,500 Australian veterans were homeless. Every year, about 6,000 veterans are at risk of experiencing homelessness. Last week, the member for Boothby and I went and visited the Andrew Russell Veteran Living Centre in her electorate, when we got to meet Duncan, an Australian veteran who had been provided with housing and who critically had been provided not just with housing but with the wraparound support services that he requires so that he could get back on his feet. And whilst I was there, I also announced the Albanese Labor government is addressing the veteran homelessness problem with the launch of the Veterans Acute Housing Program. This is a program funded through the Housing Australia Future Fund, the single biggest investment in social and affordable housing in more than a decade, and forms part of the Albanese government's $32 billion Homes for Australia plan, led by the Minister for Housing and Homelessness. This is a new $30 million program that is delivering on our commitment at the election to support veterans and their families experiencing or at risk of homelessness. Applications for grant funding are now open to veteran-aware community housing providers and ex-service organisations to apply for one or both of 2 schemes.
And if he interjects one more time, he'll leave the chamber.
There's $24 million available to build or expand crisis and transitional housing, as well as $6 million available for the specialist wraparound services to support our veterans. There's no doubt that this issue of veteran homelessness is urgent, which is why it was so disappointing that the opposition, alongside with the Greens political party, delayed the Housing Australia Future Fund by 6 months. Voting against it in this place, they delayed these funds being made available earlier, just as they are now opposing the build-to-rent scheme in the Senate. It is absolutely galling, shocking and appalling that we have the opposition and the Greens coming together to oppose further support for housing after they already opposed support for housing for our veterans.
Order.
It seems that those opposite
Member for
are
Petrie.
willing to put undisclosed billions of dollars into nuclear reactors but stand in the way of putting together the funding to support our veterans experiencing homelessness.
Order.
We said that we would support veteran housing, and that's exactly what we are doing, Mr Speaker. That's how you deal with cost of living relief, not through pushing up power bills through nuclear reactors.
Call to the honourable member for Sturt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Over the last year, South Australia relied on electricity imports from Victoria for every single week of the year, including 7 weeks where imported energy exceeded 50 gigawatt hours. During these periods, South Australia also fired up its own gas and diesel generation to keep the lights on. When Yallourn closes in 2028, where will South Australia import energy from during periods of prolonged wind droughts?
Give the call to order the Assistant Treasurer. Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Sturt, and I also visited the member for Sturt's elected very recently. I was there with someone called Claire Clutterham. Remember the name. She's terrific. She's terrific out there, talking with the good people of Sturt about renewable energy, about our government's plan.
On my left.
And funnily enough, when I was in Sturt, no one there was saying, "I can't wait for those nuke reactors to make a difference." But in the question, that was asked, in the question that was asked, he exposes the fraudulent nature of their plan. He just spoke about the closure of a coal-fired power station and what will happen in the meantime. Well, I guess they'll just stand still till 2045, till the nuclear reactors come down, if you have your plan. I mean, how absurd to ask a question speaking about the closure of coal, 24 coal-fired power stations announced their closure when you were in government, and you did nothing about it. You waited till you went to the opposition benches,
member for Holt
and then
will
you
cease
came out
interjecting.
with this absurd nuclear plan sometime into the future with no idea what fills the gap in the meantime. That's the point. You can't continue to just do nothing, because if you just do nothing, what you will do is leave a gap which will lead to a significant escalation of prices, which will lead to also a departure of investment.
The member for Fairfax.
Now, because it's Thursday afternoon, I'll give my friend the Minister the chance for the last minute.
Minister for Climate Change and Energy has the call.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. That question from the member for Sturt was the most successful intervention in the renewable energy debate since Josh Frydenberg and Premier Rann held a press conference. Not Premier Rann. Since Josh Frydenberg and the Premier of South Australia had a press conference together where Josh Frydenberg was blaming renewable energy in South Australia for blackouts, which renewable energy had nothing to do with. And I'll tell you what, Mr Speaker, the honourable member for Sturt might have wanted to check. He asked about the closure of your Lawn Power Station, which was announced when they were in office, Mr Speaker. And what did they do? They brought down the underwriting New Generation Investment Fund, which should have been called the, unfortunately, No Generation Involved Fund, Mr Speaker, because it delivered not one watt of energy. What we saw was 4 gigawatts leave the grid and 1 gigawatt come on, and that was a result of 10 years of policy indolence.
Time has concluded. The member for Gippsland, reminding people are still on warnings. They can still leave the chamber if they interject. Give the call to the member for Moreton.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How is the Albanese Labor government helping deliver pay rises for Australian workers after a decade of low wages?
Give the call to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations and Minister for the Arts.
Thanks so much, Mr Speaker. And I want to thank the member for Moreton. And I was a fine member from Queensland who wants to make sure that workers earn more and keep more of what they earn. And I was talking to a Queensland worker this morning, a bit south of your area at Tallabudra, and Deborah's an aged care worker. And Deborah was explaining to me in the last round of pay rises, as a result of the aged care wage case, which those opposite refused to contribute to, and the Albanese Labor government said aged care workers deserve a decent pay rise. As a result of that, Deborah's pay went up $500 a fortnight. $500 a fortnight. Now, for Deborah, and you look at the pressure that people are under with cost of living, for Deborah that pay rise came through at the exact time that her mortgage went from fixed interest to variable. At that exact moment, and for her, it's been life-changing and has made sure that she could deal with cost of living. A wage increase that those opposite opposed and never would have delivered and didn't want us to deliver. That's how you help people with the cost of living. You don't do it by building expensive nuclear reactors. And these pay rises mean different things for different people. Deborah was going through some of the different workers. Now, she was telling me for herself every second week she's got the grandchildren. She described herself as a glutton for punishment. She said at the workplace that she's at, overwhelmingly it's women in the workplace there. She said more than half of the women at that particular aged care centre are on their own caring for their kids. And for her, she was saying, across that workforce, how much each story is different, but for each person, the fact that wages are now moving is life-changing for those workers. There are millions of stories like Deborah's. 2.6 million people who are on the award system about to get what pay rates, pay increases. Everybody, a wage earner in the PAYE tax system, about to get a tax cut. People on enterprise agreements getting pay rises. People seeing their wages moving because of the Albanese Labor government. People getting more job security because of the Albanese Labor government. A gender pay gap that is closing because of laws that were changed under the Albanese Labor government. People earning more and keeping more of what they earn because of the Albanese Labor government. And every one of these changes, opposed by those opposite, opposed by an opposition that has one simple premise, which is they want people to have to work longer for less. You can't talk about cost of living without wanting people to get paid more, and those opposite want people to get paid less.
Give the call to the honourable member for Flinders.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Given the Prime Minister never delivered the promised $275 cut to power bills, why should we believe that the US President Biden, French President Macron, Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau and UK Labor leader Starmer have it wrong on nuclear energy, but the Prime Minister's $1.3 trillion renewables-only policy is the perfect solution to cheaper energy for Australian families and businesses?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. Well, that's an around-the-world question, and I'm happy to go around the world. Let's speak about
the Prime Minister will pause. The member for Hume is now on a warning. He is on the MPI, so that's it. No more interjections. The Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition has said when it comes to large-scale reactors, the Coalition wants to rely on, to quote him, the Westinghouse AP1000. Well, let's have a look at that. In 2008, the Georgia Power Company announced plans to expand the Vogtle plant, signing a contract with Westinghouse Electric to build 2 AP1000 nuclear reactors, the first new nuclear reactor to be built in the US since the 3 Mile Island accident in 1979. Construction began in 2009. The initial cost estimate was $22 billion, and the project was expected to be up and running in 2017. Now, after 14 years of construction, the final bill came in at $54 billion. $32 billion cost blowout in that, and delivered 7 years late. But it's not the only one, because in 2008 also, South Carolina Electric and Gas and the South Carolina Public Service Authority announced plans to expand the Virgil C Summer Nuclear Power Station, signing a contract to build 2, again, AP1000 nuclear reactors. A few false starts. Construction finally began in 2013, project estimated to cost $15 billion and completed in 2016. By 2017, the cost had ballooned to $38.2 billion. Now, in the waste of that, the project was cancelled, but only after $14 billion had been spent. $14 billion had been spent, but not a gig created, a bit like the member for Hume's schemes when they were in government, a bit like their schemes. And in the wake of these two debacles, Westinghouse Electric filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in March 2017. Now, no wonder the former New South Wales Treasurer and Energy Minister, Matt Keane, now the chair of the Climate Change Authority, said when asked why he didn't go down the nuclear road, said, "Advice to me was that in order to bring nuclear into the system, it would take far too long and would be far too expensive for New South Wales. I didn't want to bankrupt the state." That's what Matt Keane had to say. So if you want to talk about examples, we're happy to engage in this debate. In the meantime, we'll get on with providing the support for the energy that Australia needs, which is the transition that is underway.
The call to the honourable member for Tangney.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to provide cost of living relief to students and workers? What approaches has the government rejected?
Call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and can I thank my friend, the terrific member for Tangney, for his question. Mr Speaker, 4 of the most important jobs in this country, teachers, nurses, midwives and social workers, people who work in our domestic violence refuges, and all of them next week will get a tax cut.
A social worker on $75,000 will get a tax cut of more than $1,500. A teacher on $80,000 will get a tax cut of $1,679. A nurse on $90,000 will get a tax cut of $1,929, and a midwife on $95,000 will get a tax cut of more than $2,000. That's how you deliver real cost of living relief, not by jacking up power prices with expensive nuclear reactors. And if you're a student at university and you're studying teaching or nursing or midwifery or social work, then there's something else coming to help you with the cost of living, and that's paid prac, financial support while you do your practical training. And this will be the first time that the Commonwealth Government has ever provided this financial support for teaching and nursing and midwifery and social work students. A lot of students tell me that when they do their prac, they've got to give up their part-time job, that they've either got to move away from home or that they've got to do fewer hours. And that can mean that sometimes they delay doing their degree or they don't finish it at all. I got asked to tell a story. Let me indulge you. At UTS, a midwifery student told me this: "I'm a first-year mature-age midwifery student. This payment is going to be absolutely life-changing for me. As a mother of 2 small children, I'm often balancing between work, placement and looking after my babies. There are literally some days we're doing 16-hour days between my study, my work and looking after my children. I cannot wait for this payment to be available for myself and other future mature-age students who might also want to enrol in this course, previously couldn't afford to do it." That's real cost of living relief. And when Parliament returns after the winter break, I'll bring forward legislation to retrospectively wipe out $3 billion of student debt for more than 3 million Australians. Both of these things, paid prac, wiping out student debt, help with the cost of degrees and with the cost of living, to encourage more people to become a teacher or a nurse or a midwife or a social worker. And when they get to work, Albo's tax cuts will help them to keep more of what they earn.
Give a call. Prime Minister has the call.
Don't read it. Don't read it.
The member for Fairfax will resume his seat. Thank you.
I ask for further questions to be placed in the notice paper.